million children will die this year due to a lack of access to simple, affordable interventions. The world is full of problems. Over 1 billion people live in extreme poverty, surviving on less than $1.25 a day. Over 700 million people, roughly the population of Europe, lack access to clean drinking water. And in the face of these huge problems, it's easy to feel like you can't make a difference. But that would be a mistake. Today I'm going to tell you about an action that's so powerful that if you take it, you should expect to save dozens of lives throughout the course of your career. An action so powerful that if just 1 in 20 of us in the developed world took it, we'd be able to end extreme poverty for good. So what is this action? Well, I argue it's deceptively simple. It's to take the Giving What We Can pledge. The Giving What We Can pledge is a pledge to give 10% of your career income to the most effective charities. And the effectiveness part here is really important. Before I heard about Giving What We Can, I thought that some charities were 2 or maybe 3 times better than average. But the difference is much more dramatic than this. It turns out that some charities are actually 1,000 times more effective than others. And this difference is due almost entirely to the kinds of interventions they implement. To make this more concrete, we're going to look at some numbers from the Disease Control Priorities Project, a study which compares the effectiveness of different health interventions. Each heart on the slide is going to represent 1 week of healthy life. And we're going to consider how many weeks of healthy life we can get through different interventions for £1,000. The first intervention we're going to consider is a treatment of Kaposi sarcoma, an ailment that comes in the late stages of HIV/AIDS. It's expensive to treat, and so only really sees treatment in the developed world. And by treating it, we can get about a week of healthy life for £1,000. Well worth the cost. But if we turn our attention outside of our own borders to the fight against HIV/AIDS in other parts of the world, we see a dramatic shift. Antiretroviral drugs prevent the progression of HIV into AIDS. And by funding them, we can get about 100 weeks, or 2 years of healthy life, for £1,000. Looking elsewhere in the HIV/AIDS space, we see that the distribution of condoms provide us with about 10 years, or 500 weeks of healthy life, for £1,000. And if we're willing to look at any intervention targeting any disease, we'll quickly come across insecticide-treated bed nets, which prevent the spread of malaria. With these, we can provide about 30 years, or 1,500 weeks of healthy life, for £1,000. So when we see these numbers, it becomes clear that a charity which focuses on funding bed nets is, due to that fact, going to be about 1,000 times more effective than one focusing on Kaposi sarcoma. Of course, Kaposi sarcoma is important to treat. We should be treating it. But this only helps to emphasize the amazing opportunity that bed nets represents. And we need to take this amazing opportunity seriously because people's lives are on the line. This makes sense to us in everyday cases. Imagine someone you knew got sick, and a doctor offers you a number of possible treatments. One will help them for a week, one for a month, and one for the rest of their life. Which would you choose? Well, in a sense, that's not really a choice. Of course you would go for the best intervention available. Likewise, when we're deciding which charities to fund, I think it should be just as obvious that we go for the best interventions first. And when we do this, we can have an absolutely phenomenal impact with our money. For £50, you can provide about a year of healthy life by distributing insecticide-treated bed nets through the Against Malaria Foundation. Or you can cure 100 children of intestinal worms by medication distributed through the Schistosomiasis Control Initiative. And this amazing effect is explained in part by the fact that these are some of the best interventions out there. But it's also explained by the fact that most of us in this room are a lot richer than we think we are. If you earn a median income in the UK of about £22,000 a year, you are in the top 4% highest wage earners in the world. You earn 25 times more than the global average. It's no wonder then that what feels like a small amount of money to us can have an absolutely incredible impact on the world if we spend it wisely. But of course, the Giving What We Can pledge isn't just about giving better, it's also about giving more. By giving 10% of your career income, you can expect to save dozens of lives from malaria or deworm thousands of children. And this is an amazing outcome available to any of us lucky enough to have been born into some of the richest parts of the world. But if you're like me, you're probably a bit worried about the effects giving away 10% will have on your life. I was certainly worried that by giving away 10%, I'd undermine some of my projects and make myself less happy. But this turns out to be based on a misunderstanding of the role money plays in our life. New research into positive psychology has shown that money is a lot less important to our happiness than we think it is, and that by giving money to charity, we actually make ourselves happier. And this has certainly been borne out by the experiences of the over 1,200 members of Giving What We Can. In my countless conversations with our members, I have found that far from seeing the Giving What We Can pledge as a burden, they see it as a real opportunity to do good with their lives. This has been my experience as well. The Giving What We Can pledge has allowed me to have an awesome effect on the world and to live up to my values. And that's just a lot more important to me than having an additional 10% of my income. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was true for you as well. So far, I've been focusing mostly on what we can do as individuals if we take the Giving What We Can pledge. But it's exciting to think what we could do if we act together. If enough of us took the pledge, could we end extreme poverty for good? Well, it's hard to say. For one thing, it's incredibly difficult to calculate how much it would cost to end extreme poverty. One very rough measure we could use is to calculate how much it would cost to double the current incomes of the bottom billion through unconditional cash transfers. And when you do the math, it turns out that this would cost about $175 billion a year. Quite a bit of money. But it also turns out that $175 billion a year is exactly the amount of money we'd expect to be going to effective charities if just 1 in 20 of us in the developed world took the pledge. So I think it's reasonable to expect that if 1 in 20 of us in the developed world took the Giving What We Can pledge, we could end extreme poverty for good. 1 in 20 isn't crazy. I think it's something that we can do. And the best part is, there's nothing stopping us from doing it right now. We all have an absolutely incredible opportunity to do good with our money. I hope you join me and the over 1,200 other members of Giving What We Can in pledging to do so together. The world is full of problems, but extreme poverty doesn't have to be one of them.